afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar of what is cyber insurance, who needs it, what it covers, and how you can apply. So today's webinar is hosted by Pandamatics Underwriting in partnership with Blackpanda. My name is Austin Lafferty. I'm Director of Marketing at Blackpanda, and I'll be acting as moderator for today's webinar. So before we get started, I just want to go over some webinar etiquette. So first of all, there'll be no recording of the session by any of the participants. Cameras and microphones will also be switched off just to minimize noise disruptions during the presentation. Any participants who do want to raise questions, you can do so using the Q&A window that's located at the bottom of your screen. The session is strictly for pre-registered guests, and the meeting ID and password that you have should not be shared with others. As mentioned, the Q&A session will follow the presentation, so please input all of your questions there. And if you don't mind, at the end of the webinar, once you exit, we ask that you please do fill out the post-webinar survey. It allows us to have an idea of what kind of feedback you guys have for us and ways that we can continue to improve our webinar series. So today I'm joined by Struan Todd, who's Vice President of Underwriting at Pandamatics Underwriting, and Jean Yu, who's co-founder and CEO over at Blackpanda Cyber Incident Response. In terms of the agenda for today, we'll be covering two topics, primarily one, what is cyber insurance? And that includes who needs it, how much does it cost, do I already have it, along with a number of other insurance basics. Second of all, we'll be covering who is Pandamatics Underwriting? What extra value does cyber insurance policy from Pandamatics Underwriting provide? What's a response panel, who's on it, and what is Blackpanda's role on that response panel? So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Struan Todd.
Thank you, Austin. So what is cyber insurance? A cyber insurance policy acts as a risk transfer tool that covers first and third party losses in the event of an adverse cyber event. Now, what does that actually mean? I'm often asked the question about the difference between first party and third party. First party refers to a loss experienced by you and your business, whilst third party might be a loss that affects a client. And essentially, you might be responsible for that loss to that third party given on your cybersecurity components. So here we've put together a little slide that details some sample adverse cyber events, some things that might lead to a loss both to you or to your clients. So if we went with the first one and took a ransomware scenario, it's a first party loss in the sense that you could experience a loss that you can't actively undergo your typical activities. There are such costs associated with that as crisis communication costs, so telling people what's happened, privacy management costs, so if there is anything related to the loss of client information, cybercrime losses, forensic costs, legal and regulatory costs, all of these fall into these various different components. Now, rather than diving through each of these various scenarios, what we would typically recommend is that if you had a specific question post the event that you wanted to run through an example with, we'd get a broker and us involved to walk you through that process. So those sample losses and costs are detailed on that right-hand side. And realistically, before I dive into the depths of each one of these a little bit further on, I might just pass to Jean to run through a little bit of the respective costs and what they've been seeing on their side as forensic specialists.
Great, thank you, Stu. So I'll start out by talking about a bit of the cyber risks that we're seeing predominantly out of the field right now. As mentioned, Blackpanda is a specialist cybersecurity firm in incident response and digital forensics. So we are what I like to describe as cyber firefighters, right? We're just on standby and we respond to attacks and data breaches. The two primary attacks that we've been seeing over the last year in a quite alarming escalating rate here in Asia has been between ransomware and business email compromise. I always like to describe the two slightly differently in a physical analogy to make it hopefully make more sense for the just general layman out there. Ransomware I always like describing as though stormtroopers showed up to your office building, kicked the doors in, and then took everybody hostage and are now extorting you for a ransom. Okay, that's exactly the same thing in a digital manner where hackers come in, encrypt all of your workstations and servers, and then you get a encrypted message asking for, like for instance in Acer's case, which was a headlining here in Asia last week I believe, for $50 million US ransom. with the threat that if they didn't pay by last week on Wednesday, which I don't have any update on it from open source news, that the ransom would increase to 100 million. Okay, so you can see here in the stat that we've seen ransom starting to increase from 2019 to 2020 up to a median of $312,000. I would tell you here in Asia that we're seeing right in that range as well in terms of the ransom extortion notes that are coming in. Acer being an outlier, sitting at 50 million. Business email compromise, I like to make that more of an analogy to a sniper penetrating your environment and sitting there laying in wait and watching after they've taken over your email account, laying there in wait and watching how money is moved back and forth, how authorizations are made. Once they crack that code, then they insert themselves in a man-in-the-middle sort of attack where they trick different components of your company, where they think they're talking to the right person, like the financial controller, et cetera, and then maybe change an account number on the way out or reroute it to a totally different bank account. And a few weeks later or a month later, or even in some cases we've seen with some of our clients several months later, discovering 500,000, a million. The largest we saw an attempt was 2.2 million US stolen. So these two types of attacks that we're seeing out there are predominantly coming through phishing avenues of approach. That's a carefully, well, it can be quite a lax type of email or SMS or voice call that's quite obvious that it's a phishing attempt. And oftentimes those kind of lull us into a sense of complacency where we don't look so closely at sophisticated phishing type of attacks. Some of our clients have been bamboozled to click on links from what, even from our eyes, almost near identical Zoom invites, G Suite updates. Most tricky are the ones that end up asking for credentials, and the victim is tricked into clicking this phishing link, into entering their username and password. In those type of situations, this is where, from Blackpanda's perspective, that a compromise assessment or a forensic sweep is critical on a regular basis, because when an attacker actually grabs your credentials, it doesn't matter how strong your cybersecurity infrastructure is if you've given the keys to your front door to the bad guys. I mean, they're just walking through the front door and coming into your house and then dropping off backdoors and Trojans and all sorts of deeply buried malware that you wouldn't be able to find unless you did a deep forensic sweep. So these are the type of risks that we see out there. And particularly when we talk about that type of attack, the phishing attack, for those in the audience that are coming from large organizations, it's always that cliche comes to mind about, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And it is very difficult to guarantee that every employee in your organization is going to be a well-trained, alert, observant user that doesn't click on these phishing links. And so at Blackpanda, this is why we specialize in instant response, because we have a less bullish view on being able to prevent all attacks coming in. Just like in the physical world, nothing can be 100% secure, but even more so in the cyber world with so many vulnerabilities and gaps just on the basis of human beings clicking on links. And next slide, please. This is why at Blackpanda we focus on response predominantly. We can see here at the bottom of the left side of the slide, the most effective cost-saving factor to victims of cyber attack is an effective incident response team and plan. USD $2 million on average is saved for enterprise cyber attack in those cases where there's a proper fire plan, right? You have proper fire evacuation plan, there's a proper drills are run, called these cyber TTXs, and actually having firefighters on standby where you know the number, they know you, so they're not showing up in a black box for the first time when they're trying to put out this raging fire out at your building. One of the other things that I want to emphasize is that everyone is at risk for cyber attack. I think that's a really common misunderstanding that I hear out in the market, particularly out here in Asia. Say things like, why would we be attacked? Who are we? We're not so important. Anybody who uses the internet and has anything of value in a computer, you are at risk of cyber attack. I believe strongly that cyber incident response, if the physical analogy equivalent of being emergency response, being police, firefighters, or emergency medical care, everybody needs those services, right? Because this is security just merely in a digital form. We always say at Blackpanda that cybersecurity is not an IT problem, it is a security problem. And we have to look at it as such, and it's just transferred over in a digital framework. So while that being said, while everybody is at risk and we do see clients, we respond to clients across all industries. The data is showing that there are three most costliest industries globally: healthcare, energy, and financial services, that are particularly taking the brunt of attacks. But we are seeing folk even from retail to manufacturing to even mom and pop shops, NGOs are getting attacked. And one of the things that I find most disheartening is that when SMEs call us, who obviously have balance sheet concerns about paying for cyber incident response, which is a very expensive service. The bottom line is that there's a massive shortage of cybersecurity professionals in the world, over 3 million jobs, I believe, that are needing to be filled. And incident response, level 3 incident responders is arguably the highest, one of the highest level skills of a cybersecurity specialist. It was very difficult for us at Blackpanda to relocate and find the type of talent to bring into the Hong Kong and Singapore markets in this region. And there's bottom line is just that it's expensive because it's a service that is in high demand and short supply. So I found this to be very disheartening at Blackpanda, that when we ran into SME clients who literally had existential crises going on with ransomware attacks and unable to pay the ransom, unable to pay for incident response costs. We're talking about catastrophic losses or even existential crisis here for the companies. And I realized that a major, this problem needed to be solved, right? Incident response needs to be made affordable to the masses, and discovering that Blackpanda could be placed on cyber insurance panels was our approach into making this affordable for everybody. And this is why we have partnered so closely with Struan at Pandamatics Underwriting to be able to deliver our services wrapped in a financial product, right? A financial derivative here in an insurance product, so that the payment upfront for clients at scale would be a fraction of what our incident response costs would be. So this is us at Blackpanda trying to solve this problem for the Asian market with Panamatix. Next slide, please.
So in line with Jane's comments, who needs cyber insurance? In my view, it's everyone. Every business has some form of cyber exposure. One brief explanation that I'll give is, if you hold any information whatsoever that responds to PII information, even if that was sent in a letter to the wrong place, there is an issue with privacy. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a hack or a breach of any sort affecting a business. That automatically associates with a cyber insurance policy. So taking that into account and taking note of what I've just said, there are three main components of exactly what considerations need to be taken into place. They're not exhaustive, but these are probably the three basic points. So first of all, do you process personally identifiable information, or do you hold it on behalf of your customers or employees? Secondly, do you maintain intellectual property of your own business or of other businesses or partner businesses that, if that were to become public, would cause substantial loss? And three, do data, software, and computers, are they crucial to maintaining your normal operations as a business? If the answer is yes to any one of them, there's a couple of considerations that are additional to that, which are: what are the costs to my organization of being completely offline for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month? And two, what kind of loss would I experience if I lost any of this information? You know, who's suing me for it? Are there things I need to put in place to help various different people? What are the overall concerns? So the second part of this slide is pretty much highlighting the fact that cyber attackers or hackers don't really necessarily discriminate when it comes to which businesses they're going to target. Sure, they choose different targets based on their individual approach, but smaller organizations with minimal cybersecurity defenses will still be seen as easy targets. Scattergun approaches will hit them. And larger organizations with robust cybersecurity defenses are still seen as high rewards, so a lot more time and investment goes into attacking those businesses for a successful outcome. Next, please. So how much does cyber insurance actually cost? I hate to play the politician, but I can't give you a concrete figure to start with. I know Gene has always pushed me to say things like this, but I'll be completely honest and frank with you. Pandamatics underwriting policies start from as little as $400 for $250,000 of coverage. Now, it can vary drastically depending on a number of these different considerations or components. And it's not unreasonable or uncommon for a cyber insurance policy of, let's say, $5 million to cost a premium of 6 figures. So it does vary drastically. But what I would say are there are certain considerations that do factor into what that pricing would look like. So first of all is the amount of coverage. If you're looking for a small limit of coverage, you're typically getting a lower premium than if you're going for a higher limit of coverage. Your industry of operation, as Gene has touched upon briefly before, some of those industries are deemed more dangerous or likely to be attacked than some of the others. Annual revenue comes into play, given the costs associated with you in deeming whether you're a big target or a little target. Overall risk posture and relative cybersecurity techniques that you have in place, the amount and type of data that you hold as a business, whether that's your employees or clients, and your history of claims and cyber breaches. All of those factors come together for us to determine what an accurate price is in order to take on the risk of insuring a business. We'll jump to the next, thank you. So how do you apply for cyber insurance? As an ex-broker myself, my first bit of advice is find a trusted cyber insurance broker. If you don't have a trusted cyber insurance broker, I'm hoping you've got a trusted insurance broker. So approach them, have the discussion with them and say, look, you're interested in cyber insurance coverage. Now, what a good broker will do is they will talk to you and try and understand your specific requirements and deem exactly what you need in your cyber insurance policy, whilst also taking into account your overall exposures. Now, if they are a trusted and professional insurance broker who is experienced in cyber, they'll also be able to help you with partners who can remediate any cyber risks that might affect your premium or approval. That may mean getting put in touch with companies like Blackpanda to assist with your preparation for the event of a breach. They'll also help you fill out a cyber insurance application form honestly, and we do add the word honestly there intentionally. There are ways for insurers to avoid coverage in certain circumstances if it is deemed that information provided is not true. Pandamatics Underwriting is pretty proud in our approach that we don't aim to do that. We obviously want to work with the clients to make sure that we are ensuring what we intended to. So as long as the information provided to us is accurate as possible, and all circumstances that you would expect to notify us we're aware of, there aren't any problems. In addition to that, that broker will be able to help you review various different quotes. So if you obtained a cyber insurance quotation from any of Pandamatics Underwriting's competitors, and they'll be able to deem which ones have the best coverage options. Finally, they'll also interact with your other cyber insurance policies. So they want to know exactly what that looks like, which policy would respond first if there were certain coverage sections that fell into a number of policies, even if one was deemed to not be a cyber insurance policy. So here, it probably makes sense to dive into what Pandamatics Underwriting does slightly differently to the competitors. Before I pass back to Gene, so I'm sorry you're going to have to listen to my dulcet tones for a little bit longer. Pandamatics Underwriting is, and I'm sure you would have seen this on all of our marketing material, Asia's first and only pure cyber insurance cover holder. That's a pretty big claim from us. We have checked it. It is something that we're very focused on being as the cyber specialists in the region. So what does that mean? It means we push comprehensive cyber insurance rather than a cyber extension, and I'll touch upon that a little bit shortly. And we couple that with specialized cyber expertise and value-added service and technologies. So unlike the existing insurers in the market, we won't be doing all sorts of lines of insurance. We just want to be the cyber specialists. Now, because of our focus, we've been lucky enough to have the support of Hiscox as a Lloyd's syndicate, providing us capacity and also providing us support to be their partner within the APAC region. So that's a nice little pat on the back before we started. When I say comprehensive cyber coverage, what do I really mean? As I've just touched upon, there are a number of cyber insurance extensions that exist in the market. So if you bought a professional indemnity policy, a directors and officers policy, maybe even a crime policy, you may have elements of cyber insurance under those policies. Now, what we believe is that this coverage often leads to underinsurance, certain scenarios that an insured would believe to be claimable under the policy actually not being the case. And so when they have a breach or a circumstance and they try and claim on the insurance policy, the insurers say that's not the intention of what we've covered. Now, if you buy a cyber insurance coverage policy that is comprehensive, what we're looking to do is say, no matter what the circumstance, as long as it's tied to a cyber breach, that will fall to the cyber insurance policy. We're trying to give surety to any client that they know exactly where to go if they have a problem. So this comprehensive cyber insurance solution includes all of the things that you can see on this slide. It offers business interruption coverage, extortion and ransomware negotiation costs, any costs relevant to the cyber breach response panel that we have, which includes digital forensics, legal counsel, PR consultancy to minimize any reputational damage. And then these other central factors, the data recovery costs, stakeholder notification, and third-party liabilities. Now, at present, we have one insurer behind us in the form of Hiscox. We are a growing business, so we will have additional capacity as we grow. But right now, we're able to offer up to $5 million US on cyber insurance placements. So our world-class response panel. As I'm sure many of you will know, insurers all have their various incident response panels, and some of these names are common to them. What we do slightly differently, and we are the only ones in Asia who do it this way, is that if one of my insureds has a breach, so one of you individuals or your businesses have a breach, you call Blackpanda first. Blackpanda is there to do an initial triage, gauge what's going on with the business, and then we involve Crawford & Company as our breach management. So they get involved in the discussions with me and Hiscox to determine exactly who else needs to be brought into the process, how we can minimize any losses or costs to you as a business, and what needs to be done to make sure that you're up and running to full strength. So as you can see here, our public relations partner is Fleich & Hillard, and our legal counsel partners are Clyde & Co, Kennedy's, Norton Rose Fulbright, and RPC. Lastly, and the last component of really what we bring to the table is our evaluating services and technologies. So given our close strategic partnership with Blackpanda, as you can obviously see from our common logos, is that we have a strict partnership that gives certain benefits to our clients. So if a policyholder of Pandamatics Underwriting needs any assistance, Blackpanda automatically provides a care package to be able to give guidance on what should be done, some basic tips, and also provides access to a tool called Panda Recon. This tool enables fast and swift rapid response in the event of a breach from any destination. In addition to that, Blackpanda also provides discounted services pre-breach to any of our client base. As you'll see here, there's three others, Harangi, SentinelOne, and Acronis. Again, we've partnered with them for discounted rates to any of our clients. So if there's an overall discussion about cyber risk resiliency, we're able to help on all of these fronts, rather than it just being a one-stop shop for insurance. We like to think we're the one-stop shop for cyber risk resiliency. I'll pass back to Gene here to talk a little bit about what he's seeing.
All right, great. So a little bit further about just Panamatic's policy of having Blackpanda on the forefront as the incident responders. Our firm is based in Singapore, Hong Kong, offices in Tokyo, Manila, and Kuala Lumpur. We cover the entire Asia region and are hyper-focused out here. I think the core value proposition there is we're actually physically in these locations. A lot of global IR firms will claim presence out here, but don't actually have people in country. That was at great cost for us. And the background of Blackpanda is founded by former American and Australian special forces and law enforcement folk like myself, and happen to have been in the region now for over 20 years. And that's the basis of our locality. We only do incident response and digital forensics at Blackpanda. We are hyper specialized in this because we just want to be the very best in the region at this specific skill set. Our focus is an inch wide and 10 miles deep, as I like to say. We are very well versed now in ransomware negotiation and facilitation, as well as insider threat investigation when there's suspicion of corrupt or nefarious employees. Particularly, we see this in emerging market clients out in places like Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, et cetera. For example, we've developed a marine incident response capability that can operate in the OT ICS space. And we continue to build out capabilities along those lines because we just want to be able to handle every single type of cyber incident response case that comes. We want to be the definitive cyber fire station that you call when you've got a problem on a breach, and anything along those lines we can handle. And then last is that our military precision. I mentioned about our founding members, myself included, come from an American counterterrorist unit that specialized in crisis response and very rapid, consistent responses, essentially. So that's a common complaint I hear in the market, is that incident response firms are not consistent in their response, and that comes down to granular SOPs, rehearsals. Again, it's our hyper specialization that we have fully dedicated responders on standby that allows us to deliver that type of precision. Next slide, please. This is what we describe as the cyber risk management framework to understand exactly where the Blackpanda and Panamatix joint offering falls in your overall cybersecurity framework. We would say that 0 to 90% of your cybersecurity issues on the preventative side, identify, protect, detect, are covered by outsourced folk like your IT service provider or a managed security service, or maybe you're a little larger and you have your own CISO and they're managing everything internally. But essentially that's covering everything on your threat intelligence, vulnerability management, security awareness training, basically your castle walls, right, around your home, with the infantry standing on top, or the archers, right, and they're handling your frontline security. Using my firefighter analogy, we would consider these things being like your fire sprinkler systems, the alarms, right, having fire prevention chemicals, sort of things like on your building. I think that most folks would agree that that's all great, and you can invest heavily into your fire prevention products and services. But you're probably not going to bypass on having a phone number of a fire station with firefighters on standby. You never know. If you're a guy like me, in my first job when I was 22, I tried to microwave a pizza upside down and started a fire in the kitchen of the office. So no matter how good your fire prevention measures are, you still have boneheads like me, coming in and starting a fire in the office. This is where you need a firefighter, because not everything can be covered by your fire prevention measures. Well, Blackpanda are your firefighters. Unfortunately, right now, government is not well equipped resource-wise or talent-wise to be able to provide this service. So it has to be privatized. And we believe that the most cost-efficient way to access our services would be through an insurance policy. As Struan mentioned, it's a tiny fraction of the total cost of what incident response would be that you pay in a premium in an annualized fashion. We cover together that last mile of risk transfer for you. Between the time that Blackpanda shows up to put out that fire, that's where damage is occurring. And the insurance policy is coming forward not only to pay for all Blackpanda's costs, as well as legal and public relations if you need that, but also your first party and third party losses to mitigate away as close as possible to 100% cyber risk transfer. So we consider ourselves a very niche part of this entire 0 to 100 cyber risk management framework, just the very end, that last slice, as the most cost efficient and effective way for you to hedge yourself from your primary solution or your walls. Right. Next slide, please. So with that, in the actual more detailed the response process, when a breach occurs with the Panamatix policy, Blackpanda are the guys that you call. And this is slightly different from other insurance policies that Blackpanda has partnered with, like AIG and et cetera, where the call first goes to a breach coach or a law firm. This matters on this side. It's just because from Blackpanda's perspective, we just want to get in as soon as possible. I mean, just imagine, again, the firefighter analogy. Firefighters would like to get to the house that's on fire earlier before it gets out of control, and also to make sure to preserve the evidence for the arson investigation as soon as possible, right? We just want to get on site as fast as possible. And truth be told, nobody else in the whole insurance chain can do anything until we tell them what's happened, right? Because they need us to do the forensics and come back with the evidence and the data and the analysis. So we care about being the ones that are called first. And also, if you're a Panamatix client, there should be a relationship with us already, with us helping you with your pre-breach preparations and the type of technology that you need and setting that all in place, understanding how your infrastructure is. So when we show up, we're not strangers in a black box and figuring it out for the first time, right? Everything is all prepared so that if crisis occurs, which is a high likelihood these days for cyber attack, there's no looking around for where the fire extinguishers are, trying to find like, okay, what does a blueprint of the house, look like, et cetera. It's all in place. And so when we show up, we can just get down, pull our boots up and get to work. Yeah.
So I suppose it makes sense for me to just jump in there and explain the rest of the claims process. I think often, and I had this experience as a cyber broker when I was with the London market, often you get a little bit lost and you don't know who does what in this whole claim circumstance. So to make it very clear, that's the reason we pushed with Blackpanda first, because that first incident response happens, initial triage is done, and then it's up to Panamatix and Crawford as the breach coach to determine exactly what needs to happen next. So we'll get in touch with your broker and you as a client, pass it on to legal consultants if we need to get them involved, if there's an issue of privacy or further advice or notification, and PR consultants if we're needing to get them involved as well. Now, throughout that process and throughout that change and determining whether it falls under a cyber insurance policy or whatever, we will always keep both the broker and the client up to date at all times. So I've realised there was a fall down there previously with some of my past experiences with certain insurers, and we've come to this realisation that this seems like the best method, because if there's an existing relationship with Blackpanda who know your network in some way, have given advice or provided services of any sort, you're far more comfortable talking to them rather than someone you've never called before. And at least that relationship rolls through and we can talk about absolutely every component together to ensure that the claim is handled appropriately. So I think that's it on the claims process, but I'm sure if anyone's got any questions, we can come to those at the end, which is now.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Struan, and thank you, Gene. So we'll open up the floor now for questions from attendees. So if you do have any questions, please do enter them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and you can just type those there, and they'll show up for us to answer live on the webinar. So one question we did have prior to the webinar was with regard to Solarwinds. So Stu, I think this would be a good question for you. So what has been the effect of Solarwinds on the insurance industry thus far?
So it's hard to come to a determined landing on exactly what Solarwinds is going to do to the insurance industry. It's still too new, but it does touch on a topic that has been existing for a fair while within the insurance market, and that's outsourced service providers, supply chain risk, and aggregation issues. So historically, insurers have always been concerned with the aggregation issue. They've often asked about who you outsource certain things to, what systems you're using to get a clear picture of that and minimize their potential for a catastrophic loss across their whole portfolio. What else can I really say here? I suppose some have excluded coverage entirely for outsourced service providers, and that is our approach to begin with. We obviously look at which relationships we trust and which clients we can offer that coverage to, but that is the standard way we approach it. And then I would say that some are providing it for certain businesses, but rather than providing it across the board to any risk that ties to that, there is still that approach. And I see that approach continuing across all global markets, at least for the foreseeable, until this comes to a landing.
All right. Next question we have here is, so do you, Pandamatics Underwriting, have the same capacity and limits across APAC, or do you have certain limits or considerations per country?
So given we're so new, we have the same limits across every country, because at the moment we're only looking at Hong Kong. That is opening. So I would like to say that in the next couple of months, we will also be operating in Singapore, which will mean that we'll have that same limit of coverage or the ability to look a little bit higher if we wanted to across both of those markets. Given we are so new, there is a bit more of a process behind it if we want to start going further afield. And we do. We obviously want to build out to be the APAC specialists rather than just the Hong Kong and Singapore specialists. But at this very early stage, we are only focusing on those first two markets.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. How do we assess the limit of liability of a cyber policy? Is there a best practice to determine this?
Another one for me. It's a tough question. It really comes down to your level of risk aversion. So some people look at how it's structured against their other insurance policies to see, okay, well, if there was a common claim, could it infill? And I'm more than happy to talk to people about infills and crossovers between policies outside of this, but it's a little technical to dive into now. What we typically say is, if you had a business interruption loss, how much would you be losing per day? How many days do you think your typical business interruption scenario would knock you out for? And then if we're looking at privacy related, you take into account how many clients that you actually hold and what the costs would be associated with each individual loss record. So you can at least quantify what your probable maximum loss would be. Now, gut feeling in the market at the moment, the big businesses are buying cyber insurance. The smaller businesses are not yet. Those businesses, I wouldn't sit there and say you need $5 million coverage straight away. I would say, maybe start at 250,000, maybe look at 500,000, see what you think the benefits of that insurance policy are. And then as you grow as a business and understand a bit more of that cyber risk aspect, then you can reevaluate as you grow.
All right. And Gene, I think this one's maybe more suited to you. So which do you think is more costly, paying a ransom or not? What would you generally recommend based on experience?
Yeah, so, obviously the answer is it's situation dependent, but I would say that certainly if there's room for, if there's time to conduct proof of life exercises, this is really important. With the proof of life, just like kidnap and ransom are exercises to make sure that the attackers have the decryption key to actually decrypt your data in that situation and deliver the goods. We have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars for our ransomware victim clients in the past, where we were able to ferret out that it was a bluff, actually, that they only had a portion of the data that they said that they had, and turned out that that data was not that critical for the client in that situation, and they were able to, after we had made sure to harden their security environment before coming back into negotiation, tell the attackers to basically pound sand. Making sure that they were secure first before we made that move. So that's an example of a situation that why incident responders, particularly versed in ransomware negotiation and especially the threat intelligence as well, figuring out what type of ransomware variant it is and understanding its capabilities, so we properly weigh what kind of threat, how much validity does the threat of extortion actually have in that situation. These are all very important aspects of the engagement itself, as well as the advice of how you conduct the extortion negotiation. Most people out there are not doing extortion-like negotiations every day. Well, we are. So we have a lot of pattern recognition of seeing exactly the timing that makes sense of when to make concessions, when not, when you can't really negotiate further, and maybe you do have to pay the ransom at that point. So the question is quite, again, situation dependent on who the attackers are, what the client situation as well. We had a situation actually just last week with a Thai client that was ransomware, where their tolerance for the negotiation was only about 4 days or so. So there was very little room for room in terms of negotiation or any type of tour. So there's a lot of different situations there, depending on the ransomware variant and the client situation on when to pay, if at all. I would add, just as a general kind of public announcement, is that as the U.S. government has pushed out something called the OFAC advisory that would sanction companies to pay ransom to U.S. sanctioned entities, like, for instance, North Korea, certain organizations, around the world, like Al Qaeda, right? These sort of things. And so it is important to understand that there is some thought before just pushing the button and paying, because it could cause more problems down the line. For us, we're closely partnered with the United States Secret Service as one of their lead private sector partners out here in Asia. So for ransomware cases, we closely coordinate with them, making sure that we're all on the right side of things as we go forward and do this legally and safely for the client.
Great. And I think a good one following on from that, just moving more towards the pre-breach side. So we have a question here. I understand your focus on the last mile, but are you helping clients to prevent breaches by understanding their vulnerabilities and helping to mitigate those?
Yeah, so maybe this is more of a Blackpanda side, and so all Panamatix clients immediately get Blackpanda as a cybersecurity advisor, right? And so we'll come in and take a look at your security posture. Certainly, you can see by the technology products that we're bringing in at severely discounted rates, like Sentinel-1, Acronis. These are all technologies that are there to help you prepare for your post-breach resiliency plan, as well as they provide some prevention aspects as well. You saw also Harangi as a cybersecurity partner in there on Panamatix policies. These are all consultants and services and products that we can come in and help lower risk as well. It's all in our interest. Panamatix pushes us along those lines because, of course, they would like to lower the risk for you as well. We're all aligned in that sense of not wanting to see a breach, right? And so, yeah, and so I guess the short answer is yes, we do help you along those lines, although I would share that our philosophy is predominantly focused on preparing you to make sure you mitigate losses in the post-breach environment.
Awesome. Now, no, Stu, maybe do you want to add to that a little bit from the insurance perspective?
Yeah, look, it's obvious that we would prefer to avoid breaches at all. That's why we've got this partnership in the sense that we're giving pre-breach services at discounted rates. So that's why we have partnered with Blackpanda and these various different businesses to be able to do that. Vulnerability assessments and penetration testing and threat hunting, all of that gives you the advice about what you need to do to increase the systems. And even when you finish an application form for us to review, there are certain tools or suggestions that we would say that, you need to address. If you didn't have antivirus put in place, we would say we would need that. If you didn't have firewalls or regularly backup or patch, those are things that we would also be giving guidance towards doing. So yeah, we certainly focus on the pre-breach side. We're just trying to show that we need to address the post-breach scenario more efficiently as well than what our competitors necessarily have done.
All right. So we're coming a little bit close on time, so I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So the first one I'd say, so what are some factors that might disqualify a company from obtaining cyber insurance in the first place?
I suppose I probably just touched on a couple of those. So if you don't have any antivirus and firewall, those are 2 things that for us at Pandamatics, it's a bit of a red flag. We don't know what your level of risk aversion is or your investment in cybersecurity if you haven't done those basic things. Some other components as you become a bigger business, do you focus on training? Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you batch? Do you backup? Those kind of components all come into play. Depending on your revenue bandings, there are a number of different components that we would consider. But I'd like to think we don't just disqualify. We might say, do this before we could provide you with cyber insurance. And we've got partners who will hold your hand to do that. Blackpanda obviously being one of them. But yeah, we wouldn't look to just disqualify completely.
Okay. And someone's asking, is an automatic extension clause applicable to cyber insurance?
Typically, no. So it depends on how big the business is again, and depends on exactly the types of policies that are tied into it. But standard approach is that you wouldn't get automatic extensions if you're talking about what I expect you to be talking about automatic extensions as. So if there is a bit more of a question behind that, happy for an email afterwards to talk a bit more about how that would actually interplay.
Of course. So following on that, if anyone does have any other questions, please do send us in by email. I think we have time for maybe 1 more. And Stuart, I think this one's also for you. So would a cyber insurance policy typically cover things like regulatory fines, that kind of stuff?
Yep. So big question that cyber insurers often face. Yes, the intention is certainly to do so. In practice, it depends on the legislation. So there needs to be a little bit of a grey area where, let's say, a client is deliberately negligent and doesn't secure their systems and they've had a massive breach and lost all this information and they're given a fine. Is an insurer able to just pay the money for that fine and say, look, you got an insurance, it's fine? Realistically, that probably wouldn't be fined by the regulators because it shows that you don't need to put any cybersecurity in place. You haven't really done your due diligence on making sure it's all kosher. So surely the guidance would be, we're insurable by law. Yes, we plan to, but there needs to be proof that there's obviously efforts involved in doing the right thing.
Awesome. So thank you guys both again. Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Gene. And thank you everyone for attending today. Like I said, if you have any questions, please do reach out to either Blackpanda or Pandamatics via email. This session has been recorded, so if you found it really interesting and you want to share it with any of your colleagues or anyone else you know, we'll be sharing this on YouTube and posting it all over social media in the coming day or two. So if nothing else, we thank you guys for joining. Please don't forget to fill out the survey at the end, and we hope to see you guys next time.